if Canadians don't see you building something or coming together on it, be careful if you're trying to get reelected in the country. They're going to be watching.
Mark Carney is ignoring the will of Parliament. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Yesterday, Mark Carney lost his first vote in Parliament, urging him to table a budget. And instead, what's he going to do? He's going to ignore that. He's going to ignore the will of the people because he's that kind of guy. We got Melissa Landsman on CBC talking about this. We also have a panel on CBC talking about these major infrastructure Canada building projects. Are these for real? Is Mark Carney actually going to do anything? Is this just a big joke? Let's jump into this. There's this one from CTV News. It says, students and young people in Ottawa struggling to land summer jobs. Yeah, that's because the Liberals have brought in so many people. All those new immigrants, temporary foreign workers, foreign students are taking all of those jobs. This summer could be one of the most challenging summers in recent years for young Canadians looking for a job. The Liberals sold out Canada, and a lot of these young Canadians' parents sold out their own kids. And we're seeing this firsthand with stuff like this coming from the LCBO. It says Canada took in 817,000 immigrants in the first 4 months of 2025. I showed this in a previous video. 4.9 million have permits that expire in 2025. We keep letting more in. Why? There's no jobs for Canadians now. As I mentioned, this is a line for jobs at the LCBO in London, Ontario. Not really a mystery why Canadians can't get jobs. This is a betrayal. This is what this is. No offense to the people coming in, but our people have to come first. Canada visas 2025, India leads with 45.8%. Yep. Got an update here from the ostrich farm. The government is now fining them $20,000 to failing to adhere to quarantine orders. This is beyond disgraceful. The government is way out of line here. They know they're out of line. Something else is going on here. I mentioned before with pharmaceutical companies, like something else is going on here. Got this one from Blacklock's reporter. It says demand grows for Elections Canada oversight after Chief Electoral Officer fails to explain random poll closures in one riding and irregularities in others. It needs scrutiny. This is not the kind of thing we'd like to hear from Elections Canada. It says that irregularities including random poll closures, Bloc Quebecois MP said yesterday. The electoral officer apologized but failed to explain why voters in one riding were left standing outside polling stations. Elections Canada investigates itself. They need outside scrutiny. Yeah, they do need outside scrutiny. That's ridiculous. There should never be any questions or suspicions before, during, or after any federal elections. I agree. These clowns think they're above accountability and there needs to be an investigation. If anything, criminal charges brought forth. Agreed. Canada is a hobby country, serious only when convenient or politically advantageous to a political party. Next up on CBC, they talked to Melissa Landsman about Mark Carney not tabling a budget despite Parliament voting for him to do so. So technically, he doesn't have to, even though he lost the vote. Our system is clearly quite stupid because legally it's not binding, so he doesn't have to do anything even though he lost the vote, 166 to 164 votes. So check this out.
Opposition MPs are calling for a spring look at the federal books. A Conservative motion amending the throne speech narrowly passed in the House last night, urging the government to table an economic update before summer. While it's a non-binding motion, Conservatives say the Liberals should follow the will of the majority.
Exactly. So a non-binding motion, he should not be able to dodge this.
Canadians deserve real fiscal management, not excuses or fact-free talking points.
Mr. Speaker, the Government of Canada is imposing tariffs that cause maximum impact on the United States, minimum impact on Canada. Fact. Raised over $1.7 billion already. Fact.
Carney is so arrogant.
So MPs last night passed an amendment to the speech from the throne to essentially try and force the government to introduce a fall economic statement or a budget before you guys rise in the House. It was really their first defeat. Some of us were caught off guard that they went down on this one. But Stephen McKinnon, the government House leader, is not really taking this all that seriously, saying today that it was just a non-binding advisory resolution. What do you say to him?
Well, look, I think this is the first indication that you'll see a government that's a lot like the last one in terms of ignoring the will of Parliament. So you have the majority of MPs passing this motion to demand that the government tables a budget, and now you have a government sort of flat out ignoring that. And I think that Canadians deserve that. We haven't had a proper accounting of the books in more than a year. It's a convention to obviously put a budget in, and frankly, Mark Carney is the guy who said that he had a plan, and instead tabled $500 billion of estimates which is 8% higher than the 2% cap that he talked about earlier and before tabling that. And I think Canadians deserve to know where that money's spent, how it's spent, and where the government's at.
It's just preposterous that he can just not act on the will of the people. I mean, they voted, they lost the vote. He should have to table a budget. The reason why this is a political defeat, not a constitutional one, it's not a confidence vote, thus it's not legally binding. It's silly. It's basically just a political defeat. They can just keep doing what they're doing without having to adhere to the will of the people. Our Westminster system here needs an update.
Such a concern, though. Why was the language kind of weak, frankly, in the amendment? It was saying, MPs are urging the government to introduce a budget. Why not demand, require, we need to see one?
Parliament's not shade of gray. It's introduce a budget or not. Vote yes or no. There's no gray area in this. So MPs, the majority of which have said to the government, hey, table a budget. They voted for it. Canadians are demanding it by way of Parliament. And I think it's incumbent on this government to respect the will of Parliament. And I think it speaks more to the fact that they can't run a majority government, or they're going to have some problems winning votes, and they can't run this thing as if they have a majority. So I think they got to go back to the drawing board and figure out their parliamentary strategy and what they're going to do, rather than just ignore the will of Parliament.
If they do ignore the will of Parliament, which seems likely, frankly, at this point, they are dismissing, as I said, this amendment. How far are you willing to go to push this, to try and force them to actually present something?
Look, we're elected and we're sent there as MPs on behalf of our constituencies, and MPs in that House have demanded that the government, does this thing or that thing. In this case, it's present a budget, and it's not just MPs. It's providing certainty for businesses. It's providing certainty for families. It's providing certainty at a time of great uncertainty.
That's just it. We need to have a little bit of stability in this country, considering it's been months now since we've had a functional government, not to mention Trump tariffs and all of it. And then the Liberals, the first thing that happens here, they lose this vote and then they don't want to adhere to the result and they have to table a budget. I mean, you heard it in the House of Commons the other day. They just said, yeah, we'll take it into consideration. They're not doing anything. They're not going to table a budget. They don't care. Mark Carney is too arrogant. He thinks everyone is beneath him.
And if you're going to speak in platitudes and say that everything is amazing without a plan to show for it, time's going to run out on you. And I think that's what you're seeing from these guys ignoring the will of Parliament at their first opportunity.
I mean, this looks awful to the general public. I mean, the fact they lost this vote, now they're supposed to table a budget, but they can choose not to because they don't want to. That's not a good reason to not table a budget here.
The election was only a month ago. The swearing-in ceremony was, a couple weeks ago. Parliament rises at the end of the month. Their argument is they just don't have enough time to put together a budget, to put together, an economic statement.
Well, then work through the summer like everyone else does. Not enough time is not an excuse. Lazy politicians.
And that the trade uncertainty with Donald Trump provides a lot of mysterious circumstances. We don't know what could happen.
Look,
is that not a reasonable argument?
I've said this before. You cannot wait for certainty in this country to provide a proper accounting and certainty that businesses need and families need and workers need in this country. Yes, it has been a month for the election, and already they're ignoring the will of Parliament, the first chance that they can get.
That's it. The first chance they got, they're going to just ignore the will of Parliament. It's just disgraceful. These Liberals don't change. They're always the same. Corrupt to the core.
So do they not have time to put a budget together? Well, they do. We know that convention and historically, a government has been elected and presented a budget 3 months later, in some cases 1 month later. So it's not that it's not possible, it's that they don't want to.
Yeah,
I want to ask you about the First Minister's meeting yesterday. It was a bit of a love-in. I'm not sure how much you saw of it, but premiers left there saying it was one of the best meetings they've ever had with the Prime Minister, that things are quite different than they were under Justin Trudeau. Even Alberta's Danielle Smith seemed to have been pleased with what was discussed with Mark Carney yesterday in Saskatoon. What do you make of what transpired there between the premiers?
Yeah, look, I think it's more a commentary on the last 10 years and who was at the helm and how bad the meetings could have been. I hadn't been in the room for the meetings with Trudeau, but I think this is Mark Carney falling short of his own expectation setting. He came there, he said, I'm going to provide a list. We're going to have a list of shovel-ready projects or however he said, and there's no list and there's no details. And again, to provide certainty for investors to come here and actually start building the projects, to start making plans about building the projects. There's lots of things that you can say. It's not only the projects. It's pronouncements on whether you're going to kill Bill C-69 or the tanker ban, the industrial carbon tax. If this guy is about a plan and he's about certainty, yesterday certainly wasn't it. It was a lot of platitudes and a lot of photo ops.
The premiers didn't really...
Ooh, I mean, that's Mark Carney. He says one thing, does another. He's done this multiple times. I'm going to make a full list of this because they need to be documented, how many times he's flip-flopped on his own policies. He told the premiers, bring your 5 biggest projects that you want to work on. We're going to do a full list. They're going to announce them, all this stuff. There's no announcements. When asked about it, he said, oh, we don't have to decide today. We can decide another day after his summer vacation.
Really feel that way, though. They didn't have a problem with there being no definitive list. You know, he essentially said, I'm going to take back your suggestions. We'll think.
You don't really know that. I mean, the premiers are just going to say what they're going to say, keep everything nice and rosy. On the back end, they might be annoyed that there's no projects announced.
Internal trade barriers. That legislation could come over the next couple of weeks as well. Chrystia Freeland was musing about having unanimous consent to pass that bill through Parliament.
Again, we haven't seen anything, and this is their expectation setting. The Prime Minister said that we would have, some version of no internal trade barriers by Canada Day, and we haven't seen any legislation. We haven't seen anything more than just talk. We haven't seen a budget. We haven't seen any plans. We haven't seen a list of projects. We haven't seen any meat on the bones of anything. And I think that conversation is going to get pretty tired pretty quickly.
So they're talking about these projects as well on Vassie's show here. Can Carney deliver big projects?
It's been difficult for a lot of reasons, Lisa. In this instance, and Brian mentioned this, one of the things that will be key is Parliament, right? Because this isn't a majority government. I thought it was interesting that they seem to signal that they're going to put the one project legislation it sounds like it's going to be the same legislation as the internal trade barrier legislation. Strategically, what do you think of that?
I want to be joyous and happy, and I want to be optimistic and positive because these are the things that we want to have happen in our country. But there's a lot of potholes and there's a lot of hurdles along the way. And I think one thing that I would encourage people to remember is that the glory isn't for the politician that announces the project. The glory is for the politician that is there when the project's completed. And these projects, they're not going to be completed in the time frame of Mr. Carney's prime ministerial time. These are very long-term projects. Maybe you'll get a shovel in the ground. But the fact that they're going to try to take up an effort to actually get them going and underway, that's a lot to be lauded. I also believe, though, that they are doing what politicians oftentimes say needs to happen, which is we will put in place the conditions needed to have business to actually drive the economy and make the investment and create the jobs. So basically, it's over to you guys. Here's everything that we've done. It's now up to you to invest. And if I know something about Canadian business, I know that business investment in Canada has been dropping like a stone in the last 40 years. So
it's been going to America because of the tariffs. If we just compare Mark Carney's plan versus Pierre Poilievre's, Mark Carney said within 2 years, that is his window to get projects approved, where Pierre Poilievre said 6 months, and then they would be pre-approving shovel-ready zones as they go forward. So then a business can come in, buy the land, lease land, and just put the shovel in the ground. There's no permitting. That plan would have been so good for Canada, yet we got buffoons voting for Mark Carney. He's going to drag this out. Nothing's going to happen. Or if it does, it'll be directly tied to Brookfield and net zero oil and gas, or net zero hydro, or net zero nuclear power. It's all going to be net zero, directly linked back to carbon credits and all that system, so Brookfield can make a pile of money off of it. Anyone owning shares in Stripe and any other of these companies tied to that whole stupid system that we don't want in our country.
Dropping like a stone in the last 40 years. So they're, no pun intended there, Laura, but they have been absolutely not keeping up with what needs to happen here in Canada. And as a result, it's easy for politicians to say we did everything. Business wasn't with us. So I hope business leaders are listening, and I hope that people don't lose their nerve to do the right thing when it comes to this. And the politics of putting it together in a bill, honestly, Vashi, if Canadians don't see it building something or coming together on it, I would say be careful if you're trying to get reelected in the country. They're going to be watching.
Yeah, Lisa's right on point there. If we don't see something happening and soon, Canadians are going to revolt against Carney. At least I sure hope so. People think this boring banker Carney was the steady hand to carry Canada through. Canadians are expecting big projects to build Canada, projects that'll make Canada rich so we're not so reliant on America, because right now Donald Trump is just twisting our arm and we really can't do much about it. Well, especially since Mark Carney isn't negotiating with him. All he's doing is pissing him off, trying to get us a part of Rearm Europe and all these European deals. If that's his strategy, well, we're seeing the results of that. The 50% tariffs are in fact going in. This wasn't just Donald Trump tweeting. This is now happening. Mark Carney's elbows up isn't doing anything.
I think there is like an interesting sort of dynamic as well, as Lisa mentioned, Tom, with a lot of consensus around that table yesterday at creating the conditions for private investment, like some premiers emphasizing it more than others. We also did see at the same time, though, other premiers say that they hope there'd be federal money for the projects that they were pitching. How do you think those two things will happen?
Well, I think that some of the things that were so positive had to do with form. I really held on to Doug Ford's words when he said it was respectful. Now, he didn't have to about Justin Trudeau for everybody to understand that that's what he was talking about. And it's so refreshing to see Mr. Carney say, we're all going to be meeting in Saskatoon. And lo and behold, Premier Moe over the weekend saying, it's been 40 years, 40 years since the other provinces and the feds have shown up here. So that in and of itself was a signal. And yes, it had more to do with form than substance, but it informed, it gave the form to the rest of the meeting. Premier Legault was attacked really strongly by the two separatist parties. Yes, one wasn't enough. We have two separatist parties now in Quebec City by and Quebec Sunnydale this afternoon in question period because he dared go to a meeting with Ottawa and have things go well. Newfoundland and Labrador have a project on Gull Island. They've signed a rewritten a massive hydroelectric deal with Hydro-Quebec that was always a thorn in their side because they thought the initial deal was super unfair to them, and I guess it was. And now Quebec is on board, and now the feds are saying, you know what, this is exactly the type of nation-building project. We want to help you bring that electricity down from Labrador through Quebec, and we're going to be there as partners. And of course, Legault was getting attacked for it. Legault, very similar to Doug Ford, went one step further, and he goes, this is the first time, and he's in his 7th year now, he's finishing his 7th year. He says, this is the first time I've gone to a federal provincial meeting on the economy where we've talked about the economy. And he was full of praise for Mark Carney, saying this guy actually is on that page. And that's Legault's page as well. So it's just.
Mark Carney hasn't done anything, though. He's had a lot of talk, but no action whatsoever. I mean, Mark Carney set up this meeting. Well, where's David Eby off in Japan? Once again, the timing of this is so bizarre considering David Eby is the most pivotal piece here. British Columbia, the easiest pipeline to build right now is from Alberta to the West Coast, getting more oil to Tidewater, and David Eby's off in Japan bragging about chips and chocolate being in their grocery stores. That's not going to save Canada. We all know it's oil and gas. That is what will lift our country back up. That's what we absolutely need. There shouldn't be any other discussion. It should be, how can we get oil and gas to the coast so we can sell it to Asia as quick as possible? That should be the only thing we're talking about right now for the next 6 months to 1 year. How can everyone pitch in? How can we get companies to get out there, build, and get this done? And yet Mark Carney comes back with net zero oil, and Danielle Smith still trying to work with him because it's her only option. Danielle Smith waited for her moment where Mark Carney couldn't say no. So what will he do in the coming days? I mean, she's willing to work with him on this net zero oil. She's smart. She knows full well if she can get a pipeline built first, then eventually we can get rid of Carney and not do his net zero oil. So she's brilliant. I know what she's doing here. But if Mark Carney says no, then it looks like he doesn't care about building Canada. Our country is run by absolute buffoons.
Just one province, but it's the one where I happen to live and work. And I was noticing the reaction of the public to this. And the separatist parties can, whinge and whine and moan all they want. Legault got something yesterday, and the country as a whole got something. An understanding that we're much stronger when we work together. That's Wab Kinu's line as he came out of yesterday's meeting, and I think it was the best way to summarize it.
They can have their own little love fest at that meeting. Once again, where's the results? There's no projects were announced. If they wanted real results, they should have said, you know what, we're going to build a high-speed rail across Canada, and we're going to put oil pipelines underneath it and a transmission line. That would have been an actual project. Something that would have connected Canada. It would have been oil and gas, transportation, electricity. If they want to come up with a real project, there's one. They didn't announce anything. I don't think they're going to announce squat for a long time, if anything.